All right, this video is going to be a fun one. So what we're doing here today is I'll be taking my top 30 wide receivers for week 4 fantasy football, and I'll be breaking them down to my top 30 tiers and rankings here for this week's games. We did this last week. We've been doing it all season long. It's a super fun concept. And I think it's a really good way to kind of break down my expectations for these players heading into a new week of fantasy football here. So if you're new, you need to drop down, smash that subscribe button, and turn the bell on so you're never late for a new piece of content. I'm posting fantasy videos every single day of the week, and you don't want to miss out. So check that out. Click that subscribe button. Again, turn the bell on, and let's jump into the video. All right, as always, I'll break down the tiers for you guys. I did make one small change, but if you don't care about it, just skip ahead 30 seconds or so, and we'll get into our first tier here. We've got the elite wide receiver ones, the strong wide receiver ones, and the bubble wide receiver ones. Your elite guys are the guys you're most comfortable and confident in for the week. Your strong wide receiver ones are guys that I think are going to finish top 12, but aren't necessarily in that elite category. Bubble are guys in between, the 9 and 14 range, potentially, depending on how many names I like in a given week. Guys that could either slide up into the wide receiver 1 category or slide down. Rinse and repeat for the wide receiver 2 position. Essentially, wide receiver 2 is the most confident guys I am between 12 and 24, or 13 and 24 rather. And then we changed the verbiage of having a bubble, or excuse me, for the last tier here. It was formerly wide receiver 3s. It is now flex, because I do think that these are still strong lineup plays, so I did want to kind of emphasize that. So with that being said, let's dive into the first tier. All right, here we go. So for those of you looking for numeric rankings in this episode as well, you can follow the tiers from left to right here and pick up roughly on where I'm at for those rankings as well. So Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, Jamar Chase, and Tyreek Hill, as well as Justin Jefferson, are the 5 that make the elite wide receiver 1 territory for this week. This group kind of let us down last week. I forget what the stat was. It was 4 players I used, but they only totaled for like 126 yards, I want to say, between 4 of these really great players. I think it was Devontae Adams, it was Justin Jefferson, it was Tyreek Hill, and it was Jamar Chase as well. I could have tossed Cooper Kupp in there as well, but the point being, the production was pretty underwhelming for these guys. I loved their matchups last week as well. So it was interesting to see that. But for Cooper Kupp here, you've got such a consistent player, someone uber dependable, great ceiling as well. San Francisco's on the schedule this week. This is really the only Rams player that I'm comfortable and very confident in starting for this week's games. Stephon Diggs taking on the Baltimore Ravens. He's been dominant so far this season. The Ravens secondary has had some lapses and let up some big plays in the back end. Jamar Chase, only 29 yards and 6 receptions in this past week's matchup against the Jets. I do think he bounces back here against a tired Dolphins defense, though, playing on 4 days of rest, really only like 3.5 here, and coming from hot Miami to play this contest against the Bengals. And Tyreek Hill, on the other side of things, the Dolphins offense didn't get too much run. It was the Bills dominating time of possession last week. Tyreek's looking for Eli Apple this week as well. Whoever's matched up on him, whether it's him or Waddle, is probably going to make a huge play. Maybe it's both of them, but for me, he deserves to be in this tier because of that. And I also think that he's just someone, I still value him as the most important Dolphins wide receiver for fantasy this season. Of course, Jalen Waddle, we'll talk about him very shortly here, but Tyreek Hill, someone I'm just very confident in. And then Justin Jefferson, some people are very, very much so panicking on him right now. He does have a tough matchup. I'm not going to dispute that. You can say what you want about, and I've made my own jokes about this week in videos as well. You've got an early game in London this week for the Minnesota Vikings playing the New Orleans Saints, which Marshawn Lattimore is probably the cornerback assignment for him here. You've got technically primetime Kirk Cousins, so keep an eye on that. He's playing in a lone slate with no other games going on, so keep your eye on that. But those are our 5 elite wide receiver 1s for today's episode. Let's reveal the wide receiver 1s in the strong tier here. All right, so 5 more names to go in this category, starting out with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Basically, for me, this is the reason he's not in the tier higher right now is because of his ankle issue. If you saw, he had, I believe it was 6 receptions for 73 yards against the Minnesota Vikings. He had 5 catches pre-injury, or when that injury was noticeable and he started limping off the field. He had 1 other big converting catch in that game, but it really slowed him down here. So if that ankle is bothering him, I do hear he could actually miss this week's game. That's a problem. It's a really nice matchup against Seattle, so it'd be a shame to see him miss this contest for fantasy owners. Of course, we want to see him out there every single week, but this one especially is definitely exploitable, but that health concern is what plays into this evaluation here. Devontae Adams taking on Denver. The issue here is 7 receptions on 17 targets the last 2 weeks. They haven't been converting at a high rate, him and Derek Carr. It's been a bit underwhelming. Touchdowns have been needed to keep this production at a level that you feel comfortable with here. And they need to play and operate at a higher level. This is also a matchup with Patrick Surtain where, in matchups where he gets covered by Surtain, wherever he's lining up on the field, I believe Pat Surtain sticks to his side of the field, but regardless, he will be lining up and facing a very stout Denver defense. Wherever he lines up on the board here, Surtain obviously being the man of interest, it's going to be not easy. Let's put it that way. Devontae is very capable of winning in those coverage situations, but with Derek Carr's ability to produce high levels of efficiency in terms of converting numerous targets into a high level of receptions, they haven't done that so far. Their catch percentage is below 50% right now, so I need to see that get better. A tough defense, a must-win game though. Hopefully they just feed him the ball and he's able to outdo my expectations, but I do have some concerns here. Deebo Samuel, I'm expecting him to be the focal point for the 49ers offense this week. You've got a physical mismatch. I think the Rams are far inferior to what the 49ers do just in terms of bringing a punch and smacking teams in the face. I think the Rams are susceptible to getting punched in the mouth right now. And for Deebo, with Jimmy G back at the realm or back at the reins and the controls here, you've got a guy who I think elevates what Deebo Samuel can be for fantasy football here. So very, very confident in him. A.J. Brown taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. He looks like a wide receiver 1 right now. I'm not going to, go against what he's done here. He had the awesome week 1 game, and then he's come out here the last couple of weeks and produced as well, in spite of only having 1 touchdown between those second 2 games they've played this year. So I'm not worried based on the slight reduction in points we've seen in weeks 2 and 3 here. Jacksonville's a matchup without cornerback play that really scares me. So starting AJ with confidence, of course. And then Jalen Waddle here taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. Like I said, their back end can be susceptible. You can get big plays on them, especially, like I said, Eli Apple is kind of the man of interest here. You've got a situation with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. Both of them have game-breaking speed, and it's just going to come down to who gets more targets, who gets the valuable premium targets in the red zone, or who gets the deep shot downfield that scores a touchdown. So I think Miami's offense will be fine this week. I think it's their defense that's going to struggle, but I love both of these Dolphins receivers for this week's matchup. Starting off for next year here in the bubble wide receiver 1 category, I've got 3 names: Michael Pittman, Mike Evans, and T. Higgins. Starting off with Mike Pittman, 23 targets in 2 games with Matt Ryan, 9 or more in each contest. Really like what I've seen to this point in the season, and I think that he is the clear and established wide receiver 1 for this team. Doesn't necessarily have the same level of skill as some of these other guys in the top 2 tiers here, but the opportunity is there. The frame is there as well. He's pretty good after the catch, and again, a big red zone target when he gets those looks. Mike Evans here, plain and simple, Tom Brady needs him. Chris Godwin's health is still an issue. Julio Jones is still an issue in terms of his availability. Mike Evans is the guy right now. No Rob Gronkowski, no reliable pass catchers at the tight end position for this team. We haven't seen either Brait or Rudolph be super factored in. So Evans is going to go out there and get targets. He's going to get looks, and they need him to. Play in Kansas City, what could turn into a game where I don't think it's going to be a shootout. I don't think that's what either of these teams are, but you do have high-level quarterback play on both ends, so points are definitely not out of the question here in terms of that. And then T. Higgins again. I like playing this tuckered out secondary for the Miami Dolphins. They played their butts off against the Buffalo Bills, obviously the upset of the year to this point, in terms of just being a big-time win. It's not like they were supposed to get crushed or anything, but I guess it's probably most people's expectation to begin with when you're playing the Bills at this point. But besides the point, I like T and Jamar in this matchup. I think that they're going to be able to get them both the ball. And of course, T. Higgins' size and frame, his leaping ability has really been on display as of late here. He's been making some big-time plays, and obviously Joe Burrow, if you've been listening to some of the things he's been saying in the press lately, is very, very confident in what T. Higgins brings to the table for this offense. So we saw him last week go north of 90 yards. We've seen him be super dependable in the past. Actually led this team in targets last season. I'm not suggesting he's better than Jamar Chase, but what I am suggesting is that he is definitely capable of putting up top 12 numbers in any given week here. One quick announcement before we get into today's Elite Wide Receiver 2 territory. Today's episode is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy and brought to you guys by the guys at Underdog, our great friends here at SFS. When you sign up using promo code SFS on Underdog's platform, there's a link in the description of today's episode. They're going to double your deposit up to $100 when you sign up here using, again, my promo code SFS. That's how they know I sent you. And as a thank you for signing up, I get access to the names that sign sign up for my code every single day of the week, I'll give you guys access to my website, sizzlefantasy.com, which includes my weekly lineup rankings for all positions, which we just do running backs and receivers here on the channel, but quarterbacks, tight ends, and defenses, as well as 18 more names for these position groups. I give you my top 48 running backs and receivers every week. You get access to all that stuff when you use code SFS on Underdog Fantasy. And again, you can put in as little as $10 and get 10 more to play with on there for props, over and under contests, drafts for NFL main slates. They've got other sports as well. If you like basketball, hockey, they've got all kinds of different stuff on there. And again, that stuff is in the link of this the description for today's video. You'll also get private access to my DMs on the community Discord server. I will email the account that you use to sign up for Underdog and give you your credentials and information for that stuff. So go check it out, Underdog Fantasy, code SFS. And I appreciate you guys. They appreciate you as well. And I hope you guys have a fun time playing on there. I also post my Underdog picks when I make them in the community Discord server. So if you're not involved in that, free link in the description of today's video to join the community. But again, the DM privilege is a part of the Underdog or SFS Gold sign up. So for the elite wide receivers twos here, we've got CeeDee Lamb, Courtland Sutton, Christian Kirk, and Keenan Allen. For CeeDee Lamb here, look, Cooper Rush has got a pair on him. He's throwing the ball. He's giving him opportunities to make plays. CeeDee should have had more points last week. He dropped a big touchdown, came back, though, made the most of it, and was able to score a reception touchdown in that contest against the New York Football Giants. But hey, he looks pretty good right now. He has had some blunders and some mishaps. There is times when he doesn't totally feel present on the field, and I think that's more of a critical analysis from just a fandom perspective. He is not, maybe what we expected him to be coming out of Oklahoma, but he is a guy who I think is a wide receiver one with Dak Prescott fully healthy on the field. And some might want to argue that Cooper Rush has been better at providing numbers here for CeeDee's fantasy value. So whatever the case might be, I've got him here as my wide receiver 14 for the week against the Washington Commanders. I'll take that. Courtland Sutton here against the Las Vegas Raiders. He's had 7 targets or more every single game this season, and looks like he's really solidifying himself as Russ's #1 option. Now, I love Jerry Jeudy. I think that he is the more talented, better route runner, the savvier player of the two here, but Russ has been targeting him more. Jeudy did get injured in week 2, and then we saw that kind of factor into his week 3 usage, but at a certain point, Courtland's probably going to start pulling away here. That's just the reality of the situation. I'm still staying patient on Jerry Jeudy. He had an awesome week 1 game, actually dropped a deep ball that could have been a touchdown last week. But Sutton here looks like he is a fringe wide receiver 1 in most weeks. Christian Kirk has been balling out here. He has been one of the more utilized red zone wide receivers this season. He's averaging a touchdown per game. He's clearly Trevor Lawrence's favorite target, and he is doing some really great things for that offense that are very, very encouraging to see. And then Keenan Allen, this is a high floor play at the wide receiver 2 position. He's going to probably finish. He did miss a game, so maybe not, but if he stays healthy for the rest of the games, let's say, he'll probably finish as a PPR wide receiver 1 just because of consistency purposes. He'll get out there, catch a high volume of targets, and just be a safety blanket for Herbert, but not a player that's going to come out here and necessarily have a ceiling that wins your weeks for you. Into the strong wide receiver 2s now, we've got Michael Thomas here starting out with. He's got a foot issue. He's questionable heading into this London game for the Saints and Vikes this week. I do like the matchup. I think Minnesota's exploitable, but health will be the biggest factor. For Mike Williams, it comes down to simply you're playing the Houston Texans. For me, that's fine, but we know what he is. He's all in or he's all out. He's a huge ceiling, a massive ceiling, or a small floor. It's just a coin flip. Are you going to get the big-time Mike Williams? He scored the touchdown last week, had just 1 catch, though, which was that touchdown reception. Otherwise, he would have had a really poor game. Herbert's health plays a big factor here, but it's a high-risk, high-reward situation, regardless of what direction you go each week. Drake London here taking on the Cleveland Browns, a matchup that, again, I'm not too scared of here. He's been the clear top passing option overall for the Falcons offense so far this season, the most productive name coming out of either him or Kyle Pitts to this point in the season. And you've got a situation where I love his usage here. I love his size as well, his ability to be an underneath target. I think he needs to be used a little bit more. He saw just 6 targets last week, converted 3 into receptions for 54 yards and a touchdown. I would, again, like to see Atlanta give him the ball more. I think he's insanely talented and would love to see these numbers continue producing. Gabe Davis taking on the Ravens. Look, last week had an ankle injury that he was still recovering from, missed week 2 against Tennessee. it was a quiet game for him, just 6 targets actually, but didn't really cash in for much big play opportunity. The Dolphins secondary played their butts off and really only let Stephon Diggs get out there for, I want to say it was 74 yards and 7 catches. So Gabe Davis here, big ceiling as always, kind of like Mike Williams. They're very comparable here. Two guys that have larger frames, can stretch the field vertically, but you can't always rely on their fantasy floors. DK Metcalf here, love his matchup this week. Detroit's secondary is very exploitable. Got a season-high 12 targets last week, just 5 receptions, but capable of winning a 50-50 ball whenever he gets the chance. This is a matchup where I think he can do that. And then Amari Cooper here. We talked in our takeaways from last week about how Amari can really produce in these games where Cleveland's offensive line is able to hold up, and they've got one of the best offensive lines in football. The Falcons are a bottom third of the NFL team in terms of getting pressure on the opposing quarterback. So elite offensive line play plus below average pass rush equals lots of time and protection for Jacoby Brissett. Coop's going to shred him up here, and I think he'll have another clinic on this Falcons secondary. Now into our bubble wide receiver twos here. Now you'll understand why I renamed today's video after seeing this. We had Chris Olave as a must-start player for the week, but I did want to preface that these wide receiver threes and the red tier here, the flex tier, are still very viable lineup pieces because they just have more upside than a lot of running back threes do, and I really like these players. So Chris Olave's matchup we'll get to in a second here, but Deontay Johnson, as always, has a high fantasy floor. His ceiling has been very underwhelming with the Pittsburgh offense. Mitch Trubisky just hasn't been reliable enough for him on those downfield passing looks. He's actually, I want to say, top 3 in deep targets and air yards right now. He just, again, hasn't converted in those opportunities and in those stretches. So I'm actually might be off slightly on one of those stats. I can just flip through my notes here and find that very, very quickly. He is top 3 in air. Yes, it is air yards and deep targets, but he is 11th in unrealized air yards. So you're not capitalizing on those opportunities you're getting here. And at the end of the day, some of that production can be kind of sporadic and unreliable. Into Chris Olave now. This is someone I'm super excited about in terms of his long-term value for fantasy football lineups this season. For me right now, Chris Olave has an advantageous matchup. We talked about this briefly with Michael Thomas earlier, but he's coming off of, well, first and foremost, the matchup is just juicy. You've got a team with the Vikings that I believe the weakness of their defense is the perimeter of their secondary. And you've got Chris Olave, who's had back-to-back 13-target games. Now, some will tell you, last week Jarvis and MT went down with injuries. It's not going to be sustainable. However, I would caution you and point you, I've said this multiple times this week as well, he did the same exact thing the week prior against Tampa Bay when both of those players were on the field. So I feel like a Chris Olave breakout assertion here of fantasy production is coming. I think he may assert himself as clearly the second wide receiver in this offense, possibly even the best wide receiver for fantasy purposes in terms of overall opportunity and depth of targets and overall ceiling on a given week here as the season progresses. So keep your eye on Chris Olave. I'm starting him this week in the flex if you can. If not, he might just serve you well as a wide receiver too. Last but not least, let's round out today's episode with the flex tiers. We'll go Terry McLaurin to start here, coming off a season-high 9-target game in Week 3, taking on the Cowboys this week. Terry is a fast, athletic, very, very good route runner at the receiver position. If the Cowboys are able to, or not able to rather, get after Carson Wentz, and they've got some opportunities to take deep shots downfield, you could easily see Terry McLaurin making a move on Trayvon Diggs and getting him burnt downfield for a huge play. So high ceiling, of course, is always a factor here. Devontae Smith's been balling, 19 targets in the last 2 weeks combined, 249 yards between those two contests and a touchdown. Taking on Jacksonville this week. If Jalen Hurts continues distributing the ball the way he is, I see no reason why he can't continue to be a productive wide receiver in this offense. The imposter Khalif Raymond, if you just saw that, rewind like 10 seconds here, I swear to God, I put Tyler Lockett in there. Khalif Raymond manages to find his way into every video here for the wide receiver tiers. If you're wondering what the heck is going on right now, essentially, I just reused the same tiers format, but I just put new names in here every week, new faces rather. For the longest time, it was 2 weeks, but I was using Khalif Raymond's face as his headshot instead of Amon-Ra St. Brown. I just had this feeling in my gut that something was off here, and then one day it clicked when I was playing Madden that in fact I was using Khalif Raymond and not Amon-Ra St. Brown for his headshot. I literally looked up Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't know what happened. This is the second week in a row we're addressing this problem, but those of you at home that noticed that and are are paying attention to minute details here. Now, of course, all of you seeing this late in the video, of course, have noticed, but man, he is ruthless and relentless in his pursuit of fantasy lineup success. I'm sorry, buddy, you're not even rosterable. Let's just put it that way. You're like a one play per game gadget asset, a really good special teamers as well. So to end off things here with Brandon Cooks and Tyler Lockett, Brandon Cooks has a tough matchup this week. I like his involvement. He's the number one wide receiver for this Texans offense. Dropped a touchdown pass, barely missed another reception touchdown by getting a single foot in bounds instead of two in week 2. Week 3 was a bit quieter, just wasn't able to convert. I liked his matchup against Chicago. It just didn't work out. And then Tyler Lockett here, again, against the Detroit Lions. I guess one more note on Brandon Cooks. The Chargers have a very good secondary. You've got Asante Samuel, Derwin James, and J.C. Jackson, of course. So that's where kind of my hesitancy comes from, having him a bit lower in the rankings this week. And then Tyler Lockett taking on Detroit here. Again, easy matchup. Love him and DK this week. Tyler's gotten back-to-back 11 target games here, and it looks like him and Geno Smith have a nice rapport. So he's not doing the same things in terms of stretching the field that he did with Russ Wilson, but he has been a really nice slot option for this team. So let me know your guys' thoughts in the comment section below. Where do you think we should see someone moving up in the rankings? Make your case and your argument, and I might just get back to you guys. Of course, your questions, though, are always welcome. I will get back to those 100%, and I appreciate you guys tuning into today's episode, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.